So it's Friday night at the Golden Door, and we're here to talk to Paddy Glennon. And I'm going to read a little about to Mr. Glennon so you get to know who is our guest tonight. Patrick, from Ireland, I suppose, originally, of course.
My birth mother, yes.
Yes, it's a very Irish name. Paddy Glennon has been in the restaurant business for 26 years. But that has not diminished his passion when he describes the food and environment and sustainability. Beginning his career 19 years ago, he was a chef with many of the famous chefs, with mentors such as Bruno Cirino, and Jacques Maximin.
Jacques Maximin.
Maximin, of course, very French, of course. And he continues education in France and all around the world as a chef and learning all the tricks of the trade. But he's also, which I have heard of this living in Manhattan Beach, he is the VP of Sales at Santa Monica Seafood Company and the founder of the Culinary Liberation Front. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Santa Monica Seafood, by the way, is the largest distributor of fresh fish, I think, in
the Western United States, if not U.S. now.
It's a big deal. So we're going to learn a whole bunch about fish and distribution and where it's coming from and sustainability. He's joined forces with communities to promote, which this is clearly your passion, Paddy, environmental initiatives in the restaurant industry to provide nutritional education and also to understand sustainability and also maybe consciousness that do fishes and the things that we eat, are they harvested the right way for us to be able to consume? He's been featured on several television shows, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, magazines, and a constant speaker on education on the sustainable food industry. He resides in Dana Point in California with his wife Christina, who's joining us tonight, and they have 6 children. That's a lot. That's good.
Irish.
This is a quote. I'm going to quote something. If you cook for charity and environmental awareness, there's a lot to be done. Everything I do is straight for charity, helping farmers, ranchers, and fishermen survive. I understand you turned down Top Chef.
Turned down Top Chef.
Because they wouldn't understand your messaging. Can you explain?
I was looking for a bigger platform to speak from. Mm-hmm. You know, I find our food system completely broken here in the United States. I find we're going down the wrong path as a world to feed the world. And in trying out for Top Chef, I always make it to the top tier. And then when I got to, and I was looking at it as a way, I was going to try and use it as a boycott in the end to get far into the show. And when they're working with things that are coming from hormone-infused beef and things, I was going to walk off the show. That was my whole goal. And would have been a good message because I know I could get the crowd behind me. I've done well with that. And they could never understand. They're like, well, where's your restaurant? I'm like, well, I cook in farm fields with chefs for people to teach them how to eat right. And they never understood that, you know, so it was kind of fun.
That sounds like it's fun. Well, I'm going to ask you for some.
They couldn't market that, you know, at the time.
What's it like to be the biggest seafood distributor in probably the United States and still remain conscious about the sustainability of what you're providing?
Well, you know, Santa Monica Seafood is a single family owned company. We're going to be 76 years old now. In one of the parts of a merger that we just had, we now own Chesapeake Seafood down here in San Diego, which is a 100-year-old company that had not adapted to the new chef. And that part of sustainability, we're going to keep them going and grow them to where they should be. But as the largest distributor now, we do things in a way of proper sourcing. We like to call it proper sourcing, not sustainable sourcing. And in proper sourcing, that includes sustainability is part of it. All right, how we get it here, how the fishermen or those that work for them are treated. Is it fair wage? There's a lot of slavery in our industry. There's a lot of illegal fishing out there, and that product comes into our country.
You mentioned 92% of the fish eaten in the United States is imported.
92% currently is imported into the United States, and that's why this evening.
Is there any country that's leading the importation?
As in where it's coming from? Currently, most of our shrimp comes in from Thailand into this particular country. Canadian farm salmon probably takes up at least 40% of any seafood company's sales. You know, most people go to salmon. You know, even chefs, they have a tendency to think, I'm making the menu, I need rack of lamb, I need filet mignon, I need a ribeye, I need salmon, you know. and it ends up on many restaurant tables.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's always the question about salmon, farmed versus almost free, swimming up the stream and you're catching it on the rod. What do we tell consumers today? What's the right thing to look for when they buy salmon?
Well,
how do they buy it?
In looking for salmon, there's been a lot of advancements in farming. Farming, when it originally happened in Norway, they had kind of collapsed their wild fisheries, and they went to farming, and they released the smolt, the small salmon, into the rivers, and they went out to sea and never returned. They waited 2 years, nothing came back. They went bankrupt. Over time, they decided to go to pen farming. It took a long time, and
does it taste as good?
Well, in pen farming, in the original pen farming, boats would hit them, release them, whales would hit them, so they brought them inshore to areas that didn't have high tidal exchanges. That created a lot of pH balance difference in the salmon. Created problems with the oceanic floor over time, and a lot of salmon farming is still done that way today. We have seen advancements in farm salmon where they are working with areas of high tidal exchange, low pen density. If we put 20 people in a small room and expect them to stay there for a year, it's not going to be a pretty sight when we go to take them out. A pen farming or a high pen density chicken, poultry, pork is all the same. We have to give them antibiotics not to make each other sick. We bring that into our systems. It's not a healthy way to live. We are working in Santa Monica to help work with, develop, and sell to sustain the farms that they can sustain low pen density fish, like 98.5% water to 1.5% fish.
How does the consumer know that? So you sell wholesalers and restaurants, and I understand Santa Monica also sells consumers.
Yes.
So how does the consumer get the same kind of food the restaurants do?
We sell through our retail stores like that, but for a consumer, the first thing to look at between farmed and wild caught salmon, U.S. caught, is sustainably caught. Done. End of the story right there. When it's in season, by all means, go for wild. When it's not in season, you still want to eat farmed salmon, and you see Atlantic salmon listed right there. Well, where is it from? What farm? How is it farmed? What's in the feed? How much antibiotics do they use? Do they use antibiotics? You would not go to a restaurant that had a wine list that said red wine and white wine.
Yeah.
You have where it's from, okay? Salmon should be the same thing, and we have salmon that are from farms that have all kinds of sustainability certifications, proper feed. What goes into the feed is non-GMO. I mean, there's a level of farming that's here, but the consumer needs to look for that.
Would you recommend for our guests to actually sort of, we do that. Our fish comes from this farm and our chickens come from that farm. But when you go to a restaurant, you're right, it just says salmon.
Yes.
And should we be asking, where did it come from?
If it just says salmon on the menu.
Was it even the United States?
Yeah, if it says salmon on the menu, most likely if it's a farm salmon, it doesn't come from the United States. It can come from Chile, it can come from Canada, it can come from Norway, Scotland. Some of these places, they do a great job with the fish. Some of them, it's high commodity farm salmon. Right. The cheapest possible feed to make the most massive protein possible to get the market at the cheapest price.
Well, and I would
What's
imagine,
in it? I wouldn't feed my family.
Well, and maybe some chefs know, and maybe some chefs don't know.
Most chefs don't know.
Right, there's my question.
Yeah.
Even if you ask the chef.
Most chefs don't know. Most chefs don't know.
Is there like a trick question that you could know in a second that they don't know?
Most chefs don't know how to even fillet a salmon. We
Yikes.
send
So the salmon comes in pre-ready.
Yeah, we send more fillet to chefs than anything else.
Really?
So you give them a whole salmon, and you see how they can cut it down, and you just smile.
Right, because it's not good.
No.
Is there a question that a guest that's eating in a restaurant could ask the service and saying that would give them some insight into what they're being served?
I would say no. If it's not written clearly on the menu and the waiter doesn't know exactly right off the top of the head, I can guarantee you most of what the waiters will tell you will be something to get you to shut up and move on. Well, I do a lot of as a matter of fact, tomorrow when we go home, we have to be in LA to teach 75 waiters at a new restaurant everything about every fish they have on the menu. we would like at Santa Monica Seafood, the waiters know as much about the fish they're serving as the back bar. You ask them about the back bar, they know all about the liquors and things. They make more money, they get more tips out of you. They know nothing about the fish.
Wow.
They run back to the chef, or they don't even run back to the chef. They say, oh, it's wild, it's fresh. You know, they don't know, you know, they don't know. And unfortunately, the modern chef works off a fax machine, works off an email, works off of what the vendor tells them. And we open our doors to get chefs to come visit us. Please come visit us. Please see how we operate. See how we do food surety and purity in our operations. Then go visit other places. And you'll make the decision if you want to buy from us. One of the things when it comes to chefs that I see, they should not be asking, why is your fish so expensive? They should be asking, why is the other fish so cheap? All right, because there's a lot that goes into cheapness.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask kind of a two-pronged question. One is are we having a relationship face-to-face with the foods that we eat, especially the fish, the foods that were alive? And should people not have relationships with people like yourself, fishmongers and direct butchers who really know where the food's coming in? And is that something that can grow, or do you think the supermarkets and all the stores will just completely make it impossible to grow?
Well, supermarkets, you know, the thing is, for chefs and consumers, we are teaching through the Ecology Center in San Juan Capistrano, which is a chef-driven ecological outpost run by Evan Marks. We are teaching outwardly how to live and eat within your food shed. Your food shed is all that grows around you. All the farmers, ranchers, fishermen, and you could be in Wyoming, you can be in Connecticut, you can be in New York. There are farmers and there are foods grown around you. What happens is chefs and consumers end up going to the grocery store, and they have the center of the grocery store, which is completely driven by massive companies at the higher level. Some of those brands that, you know, Good Earth and all these other brands, I'm not going to mention a brand, I just made up a brand, are driven by corporate, corporate board of directors, and they trick you into eating a certain way. Few people are now eating on the outside of the grocery store, which is your fresh produce, your fresh meats, your fresh dairies, your fresh vegetables, and they're eating more of the processed foods. And ultimately, we're putting all these chemicals in our body, and we're being trained that way. A chef also, when they are working, they tend to work with commodity brokers that carry everything from trash bags to fish to meat to laundry detergent to vinegar, you know, and you have one sales guy trying to tell you all that. And, you know, it's big corporate America serving us. Yeah. And big corporate America's main goal is to keep their stock high, to keep their stockholders set. And when it comes to you and your family and your nutrition, that's not their main goal. Right. Their main goal is profits.
So there must be, I don't know, but I'm assuming maybe fishmonger conventions, or
yes, we have
places where do people find fishmongers?
Well, you know,
I mean, it's not like something that's high on the list.
For the layperson, you know, I think one of the easiest things
is it a growing field? Is it a growing business? Is it a career?
Fishmongers don't fall off of trees. I mean, as we grow, we have to train from scratch.
Yeah.
And fishermen is a dying field in our country. We've put a lot of constraints on our fishermen, whether it be gear regulations, site regulations, paying for NOAA onboard advisors. Like, you're a USDA facility, you have to pay for the NOAA onboard advisor on certain fisheries. It's like $80,000 a year before they even start and get out of the port. It's a lot of money to operate in the United States. So we're not adding boats, we're dwindling. Wow. Okay, so one of the best places for people to start is the Monterey Bay Aquarium app on their phone. So they can look when they're somewhere, they can look to say, okay, where's this from? Yeah. Okay, I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, when you're looking at a grocery store, look to wild, U.S. caught fish
Yeah, US
first.
That's a tidbit, right? I've
First.
never heard that, U.S. caught. That's kind of nice to know that if 92% is imported and we have no control on that, buy it ourselves from the U.S. where we have higher rules, that might make sense. That's a good piece of information.
Well, when it comes to wild fish as a carbon footprint for the world, a protein source, when it's done within a sustainable quota managed fishery that we know that we're leaving for future generations, we're getting a protein source that is not giving carbon gases off, it's not full of hormones, GMO feed. Most of our protein is from a GMO feed, which is wiping out our bee populations. It's a downward spiral of how we're feeding ourselves in this country. And if you can buy U.S. caught, why buy U.S. caught? In 1998, Congress amended what's called the Magnuson-Stevenson Act. That's our laws and regulations on sustainability of our country and our resources. They amended it that by 2012, and we're in 2015 now, by 2012, all our oceanic borders, rivers, lakes, and streams are to be under quota managed fisheries. We've achieved that. It doesn't mean that the fish on George's Bank are going to rebound right now. It means anything drawn off of that fishery is going to be done in a rehabilitation manner.
That's good to know.
So we as a country are the blueprint for the world on managing our oceans. And the other flip side of that is 92% of what we buy is imports.
We're only looking at 18%.
The modern chef
Even
likes
less.
something he can. How many people have had a restaurant they go to and the fish is in a square? It's a square, okay? People like to cut it into a square, put it in a pretty box, not know where it's from, not know the lives of the people that put it into that box. There is a lot of slavery in our industry worldwide, in fish, in shrimp farming, in cocoa production, in coffee. You know, we go to some of these major coffee stores and you used to see fair trade coffee. You don't really see it anymore, and it was always at the register next to the very famous water, you know. But where's the rest of the coffee coming from? What are the lives of the people that made that coffee? Most likely they're deplorable, but we put it in a pretty box, and the new norm for us in this country is to accept that as a great product.
Right.
Yet we don't know where it came from.
I think that asking the questions helps, and I think just by knowing U.S., but I want to go to a little bit different spot. What about the concept of, you said something like looking into the eye of the fish and really understanding. We're going to talk a little bit about the things that you brought here before I go to a different page. Really understanding that fish's purpose and use and wholeness. Do we do enough of that?
No, you know what we're trying to outwardly teach right now as a seafood company and as our ecological friends in the industry. We're trying to teach chefs to look at a fish like the black cod here. In the black cod, you have the collars, you have the bones that make a great sauces. You have the
Which is
top
the big
line.
one, right? The
Yeah.
big one's the big, just for those of us who might not know, by the way.
The big
giant
black
one is
cod
the
right
black
there. You have the top loin that could be used for chefs as that big square cut piece of fish that they look for
That's
in
like
the restaurant to put on their garlic mashed potatoes
that
and their
miso
fried
cod,
things
yeah.
on top, or their foams. You put that on top. You have the belly to be done something completely else. Can be done for sashimi, can be done for smoke, can be done something else. The tail, the egg roast sack can be cured and smoked and shaved on pasta. There's so many things just off of that one fish that we can do, whereas we can get away from looking for those world-traveled pelagic fish such as tuna, opa, ono, mahi, swordfish that are in jeopardy of disappearing in our lifetime.
That'd be terrible. Now, those are the same, those shrimps are still alive, I understand.
Yeah, those are actually all the fish on that table except for the sea bass was caught this morning about 3 a.m. by Scotty Brennan from the Newport Dory fleet.
Wow.
He's a local fisherman, and what I'm trying to teach chefs in general to somewhere within their recipe, somewhere within their menu, doesn't have to be the whole thing. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Start out at least with one thing that you shake the hand of the man or woman that farmed, raised it, caught it, or ranched it for you, that you know who they are and you have a relationship with that person. that relationship for a chef is spiritual,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
and their food gets brightened because of it.
Yeah.
And we're not doing like, for example, a Caesar salad, okay? Our restaurant industry is very repetitive. If we make decisions on what we purchase without thinking about where it's from, how it's farmed, or how it's made, we repeat that over and over and over thousands of times in a year. So a restaurant on one single dish can have an environmental impact or a cultural impact that's extremely negative without even realizing it, because they're getting a box at the back door and they're paying for that box.
Well, it is kind of interesting, I think, for all of us. When you buy a bottle of wine, you know it's from Sonoma or France or Napa or Chile. You know where the wine is. You know what kind of a wine it is. But when you order a piece of lettuce or a salad or a fish, you have no idea where you're eating it or where it was grown. And how do we solve that? Because I think that the new guest and the new consumers, they want to know.
They want
so
to know.
how this movement's going to get bigger, not smaller.
It's going to get bigger, yeah.
So how are we going to know? Because we have labels on everything. We know where the wine comes from, and that's kind of silly. That's the liquor side of our life, not the real sustainable side. How will we know?
Well,
we ask every single time we go to a menu. They won't have any idea.
Well, now in grocery stores, for instance, it's mandatory in the United States that every seafood that's displayed has to show country of origin.
Okay.
And as you go through, that's an easy way to find out what's U.S. caught and what is not, what is farmed and what is wild.
But restaurants aren't going to tell you that.
Restaurants are not going to tell you that, but you know, if you're, you know, depending on, this is the strength you have. You have the most incredible weapon you've ever seen in the world. It's called a wallet.
Yeah, it's called a credit card.
And you're pulling it out to pay for a service, a good, or a product. And if you're pulling it out, you can care about what and how and why you buy. And you can support those that are doing it right and not support those who are doing it wrong. You don't need to bash them, but what we're trying to do at the Ecology Center with what's called the Chef's Accord, we're outwardly teaching to the entire community how to do it right. Not that you have to follow us and you're going to close your door. It's like, let us help you get there. If we can change 800 restaurants by 10% in the right direction, the environmental positive impact that we will have is incredible.
Exactly. So let me take that a different place then. So organic certification in the United States is one set of standards, but organic certification in South America and Asia are completely different.
Correct.
So is there a book that says that, by the way, when you think you're buying organic and you look at Organic USA and Organic Chile, it's not the same? But you think it is when you're shopping, right? You think, right, we're just regular people like me. I go to the store and you buy the oranges and whatever. It's not the same at all.
No.
The levels, is there like a tip guide? What as consumers, what tips would we have to know that the standards are different by country?
Even you look at a non-organic vegetable, for instance. Here in California, from what I understand, we have 10 legal certified pesticides that you can use, 10. Just across the border, they have 50.
See, that's a big difference.
Of those 50, 40 of those we've banned here in California because they're carcinogens. Yet with NAFTA, we are mandated to import that product into here. That product comes across the border because they're cheaper chemicals, cheaper things. Even for the non-organic farmer, that is wiping them out because it's cheaper labor, cheaper everything. So a box of mixed greens comes across the border at $4 a box, and it costs the farmer here $7 a box. I can guarantee you the U.S. chef's going to buy the $4 a box mesclun green over the $7 box.
So let me ask you a really crazy
question. And we don't know what pesticide is in it.
I know. When you go to farmers markets, are those all typically required to be all U.S. local farmers?
No, it depends the farmer's market. Every farmer's market is different.
Could a foreign farmer be in there just as good as everybody else, or not really?
You know, every single farmer's market
is different.
Okay. They're run on their own.
Okay.
It doesn't mean, you know, I go to farmers markets, I see that they have, some farmers have stuff right out of the Central Cooperative Produce Market in LA. In the farmers market, because people are buying it. You know, people are taking out their wallet, they're supporting it. There are certified organic farmers markets. Then there are farmers markets that do a great job working with those farmers that are following organic principles in how they're farming, but can't afford the certification.
Yeah, that's
Part
true.
of that organic certification is it's a certification that they have to pay for every year, go through testing every
Yep.
year. It's expensive, and a small 6-acre organic farm cannot
Yeah.
afford that. And those rules and those legislation for those rules are set in place by lobbyists of corporate America, because they want their organic farms to be in control of the marketplace.
Right.
So we are systematically in this country wiping out the small farmer.
You're known as a food warrior. In a study released last year, watchdog group Oceana found widespread seafood fraud in Southern California. Roughly 55% of the 119 samples collected from restaurants and grocery stores were mislabeled according to federal guidelines. Can you explain, and is this happening across the nation?
Absolutely.
So explain what is seafood fraud for my guests. they
Seafood
know.
fraud is people selling, whether it be at the consumer level or at the distributor level, fish or products that are not the same or correct product.
Be really specific for them, because what's the
Well,
biggest form of seafood fraud you've seen in the United States?
One of the biggest form that I run across day to day in chefs' refrigerators is they're thinking they're getting a certain product or a certain thing. They're just not educated enough, and the fish supplier is selling them something else at a lower price for the marketplace, so they buy it, but it's a super high price for what that product is.
Give us an example.
Organic Scottish salmon. There are brands of organic Scottish salmon that are labeled by their name and are sold by their name as they should be, like a fine wine. They're amazing products done by amazing people. And some of these fishmongers or distributors sell more of that product than they buy. So when the salmon comes off the bone in fillet form, it looks like the other product, but it's not farmed the same, it's not raised the same, it doesn't taste the same. So they can sell that product cheaper than a company such as Santa Monica or other fine vendors. They can sell it cheaper than us.
Yeah.
But then when we bring in the real product and cut it next to it with the chef, which takes time, and we taste it, I always tell them, like, I'll bring in the whole Scottish salmon that has the tag from the farm it comes from, and we'll break it down. These are top chefs. These are not knuckleheads. These are top guys that magazines are written about. I'll break it down. We'll cut it to sashimi. They'll go to pick it up. I'll grab their hand. I say, stop. Go in the walk-in and get your other fish you have there now. That's the same thing. And I make them bring it out. And then we taste it. And every time they're like, oh my God, you know. But it takes a lot of work to do that, you know.
Well, how would we know, though? How would if that sounds like if 55%, that sounds like that's a pretty big number.
Well, part of that study, and Oceana is doing great work, and I think it's a great need. You know, these third-party NGOs, non-government organizations, some of them are doing some great work. Some of them have an agenda. Some of them are put forth with a great agenda, and they have a great process, but a big part of their process is raising funds, and their management boards make lots of money. That a lot of the, you know, if you look at a lot of the places you spend your money to because it touches your heart, you look at how much is spent on the organization of running the organization and how much actually goes to where it's supposed to, you'll see the balance is off. I'm not saying that's Oceana at all. But a lot of that study was done, and they repeatedly went to the same restaurants, reported the same thing, so they kind of missed the balance. Part of that was the Japanese, they call escolar white tuna because they don't call it what escolar is. Or some of the labeling on fish now is coming through FDA, and they use Santa Monica Seafood because the way we operate, we have complete control from the boat, from the purveyor, from the purchase order, is regulated along with Monterey Bay Aquarium. We're the only company in America that has a contract with Monterey Bay Aquarium. They monitor our paperwork on everything. So we document in, document out. So if we buy a certain type of farm salmon, we show paperwork of how much we sold at the same weight.
So you know you're keeping it straight.
Right.
So Paddy, let me ask you a different question then. When you think about all your sustainability efforts today in the world and what you see happening in fraud, what is the most, or maybe let's call it, what's the worst sustainable fish situation going on today?
There's so many.
Well, just pick the worst. Or pick
there's
one.
so many. You know, I think the biggest problem is illegal fishing. We have passed our oceanic borders. We have great treaties with Canada. We have great work with South American countries. Europe, the European Council works extremely well together. Then you go across into international waters where you have countries fishing there that don't have necessarily the agendas of the European Council, and it's wild, wild west. Say you have 100 halibut in the ocean, and the marine scientists, through their studies and non-government organizations and Fish and Game, they decide there's 100 halibut in the ocean, okay? If we take 50 of those halibut, the other remaining 50 can lay enough egg larvae to replace those fish as the years come along for sustainability. Knowing that there's oceanic currents, Exxon Valdez, whatever happens, they say, you know what, we'll just keep it at 25. After the egg-bearing females have gone through that period of time, they'll open the fishery, which for us is around March 7th. And it goes through November when the egg-bearing females start to bear eggs again. And it ends in November. If by June all 25 have been caught, the fishery is closed. If by November there's 5 fish left in the ocean, they stay there. That's basically how a quota works. Yeah. If we have illegal fishing out there, for instance, it's considered 70% of Chilean sea bass now is under quota management, but 30% is still done through illegal fishing, okay? And it's the same countries, and we try to get on them, but that fish still makes it into this country.
Yeah, it does.
You know?
Well, 92%. Well, you know, I think one of the interesting thing is understanding as consumers a feasibility and a seasonality chart. Is there such a thing that shows for our guests and people who shop where to actually shop and buy fish at what time of the year?
You know,
is there, you know what I'm saying? Is this something you can share? Is it a place online that we can get that information?
We have published them for chefs as a company. Mm-hmm. There are books out there. You have to do some research. And you know, the thing is, you look in just even the United States, you have the Eastern United States, you have the Gulf of Mexico.
Is that something you could get online? Like we'd know we're buying fish that really is in season?
You know, www.noaa.org has complete listings of when fisheries are open, when they're closed.
That's kind of
interesting. And every single fish that's in U.S. markets is listed there. Internationally, no. Internationally, farm seafood, such as anyone has ever have, Ludimero bronzino, which we now have to call Mediterranean bass by the FDA. It's farmed in Chile, it's farmed in Tunisia, it's farmed in Greece, it's farmed in France, it's farmed in Italy, and it's not all farmed the same. You know, most of it is done in that particular species is done better than other farming, but it's still not all done the same. You know.
I have 2 more questions for you tonight. This one's going to be a fun one.
Sure.
So we all want to know what it was like to be on Cutthroat Kitchen.
Cutthroat Kitchen.
Does anybody know Cutthroat Kitchen? Anybody? Can you raise your hand? Anybody know Cutthroat Kitchen? It's a very interesting show where, you know, you have to bid for these things and you can get like claw gloves. You have to try to cook with it, or you get like a spoon to make your dinner, and your whole dinner has to be made in a spoon. So first of all, I want to hear, how did you get there, and what were your challenges?
You know, my wife and I had decided that we're trying to get me back to, as a chef, I was very well known. I had TV shows on A&E. I'd been on Food Network from the beginning, is to get my name bigger in the marketplace again, because I had done so much charity work and environmental work as the silent warrior, like, you know.
I know.
And,
you are the
you know, it's like, we were like, but who was coming to all our events were the same people that knew about what we were talking about. So we said, hey, we need to reach a wider audience. So we decided to start going after some of these shows again. And I got, from my background, I got picked for Cutthroat Kitchen.
And you went all the way through to the end, right?
I went to the finals,
so
yeah.
we want to hear what your challenges were.
The challenge was
Like, did you get to use your hands?
I got I owned my own sausage company, and we had sausage and peppers, which is the easiest thing for me to make. So that one, no matter what, I knew I was going to survive. But they took away my stove.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to use a microwave only. I had to caramelize in a microwave, which is, I think, virtually impossible. As my wife knows, I can't, I can't do anything on computers or cell phones, and this is like a
tiny microwave.
Really advanced microwave. I couldn't even get the damn thing to work, That was hard. But as
so what was your last challenge? Did you walk away with your money? Did you have to use all your money?
No, in the end, and I know that I lost in the finals. I know that I beat her in the finals. They really had to cut and edit the show to show she won, because clearly even on the show, she lost.
Right.
And I'm not being a poor sport. I destroyed her in the end. In the end, we had like a 20-minute challenge. I bought 15 of her minutes. She only had 5.
Oh my gosh.
And in the beginning, she had cooked her shrimp raw in one of the series, and she still made it through because someone made something even more horrible. And this time she overcooked the shrimp, and she didn't even make the right thing. And I made the right thing, and he loved it, but he hated. He just blamed it on there was too much orange or whatever.
Yeah.
I came out with a restaurant quality dish because I had really no constraints. She gave me frozen shrimp, which I'm a fishmonger. It took me a minute and a half to thaw out.
Right.
And it was the same shrimp she had. They were making it look like that's a wild shrimp, and it was the same shrimp. So I had that done in 20 seconds, and she spent like $8,000 on that frozen shrimp.
But you'll have to see the show to understand it.
But I had basically taken all her time and
you spend all your money getting the other person to get like penalties.
Yeah, I bought all her
you can
time.
Like have your hands tied
I bought
behind
all
your back.
utensils.
Yeah, exactly.
She
it's
came
really
up literally with a cup of crap.
Right.
And
it's really quite
and
cute.
They were starting the Twitter for the show, and I think they wanted controversy, which is all right. It was fun. Because even the staff, they're like, when he announced it, he was like, and he announced the girl, and she's a really cool girl. They announced the girl. She was just trotting. She was like, what? I won. She was like, so it was kind of fun. But you know what? It was just fun for my company, for me to be on there, and someone to be as far removed from the kitchen as I am outside. And I cook in farm fields. I stand on a hay bale and I speak half the time, or talk in front of large conferences now. To go on there and just see that I am, and they had some great competitors on that show, that I'm still highly skilled at a level above them.
Good for you.
Made me feel good from my training, because I worked for some animals in France.
You've been known as the culinary activist, an absolute bulldog about sustainable, eco-friendly seafood. A lot of the things we've talked about tonight. What 3 things can you leave as golden nuggets for our guests tonight to take home?
Golden nuggets, support and buy wild U.S. caught product wherever and whenever possible. When buying fish, go to a reputable company. Go to a reputable location. Go to someone that you can trust on, and look for certifications where they can be, whether that be MSC, Friends of the Sea, some types of certification on your product, because that will give you the surety that there's marine science and biological science behind what you're getting there. And finally, look for freshness. And I can tell you, if it's farmed in Asian countries, not against Asia. There's a lot of great product comes from Asia, but if there's a farm product coming from Asia, don't buy that. I can guarantee you most of the time it is part of something not good, including a style of living for people that you don't want to ingest that into your body.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and I have looked forward to this interview. I want to thank you for being here with us tonight, Paddy.
Thank you.